Hi, everyone, and welcome to our investor webinar series. Today, we're joined by Immuron, a NASDAQ-listed, globally integrated biopharmaceutical company focused on developing and commercializing oral immunotherapeutics for the treatment of gut-mediated diseases. Today, we're discussing a few critical topics, one of which is the recent positive phase 2 data from the company's first-in-class oral polyclonal antibody therapy, Travelan, IMM, or otherwise known as IMM-124E. We'll also be discussing the upcoming phase 3 trial plans for this product, research and development plans and pathways for the company as they're pursuing realizing the full potential of this proprietary technology platform. We'll be discussing other topics as well. Joined today is Steve Lydeamore, the CEO of Immuron, bringing 30 years of international pharmaceutical experience to the company. We're also joined by Dr. Joanne Casey, Research and Development Manager at Immuron, as well as Dr. Jerry Kanellos, Chief Operating Officer at Immuron. So with that, let's jump right in. And Steve, I'd love to hand it to you to kick us off. Can you give us a broad strokes picture of Immuron and your broad pipeline, including the commercial assets? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Look, I'm happy to be here today and have a chat with you all. Look, Immuron's a very interesting company in that it has a platform technology from which we've developed 3 different therapeutics in 4 clinical programs at the moment. Matt mentioned that we have a phase 2 program we're going to talk about today. We have another one that's just completed dosing in phase 2 as well as another that's in phase 4. What's unusual is that we have 2 commercial products on the market, Travelan and Protectin. In the 9 months to March, we've done $3.6 million in revenue, up some 154% last year. So that's all very exciting. We've got revenue growing and platform technology generating clinical assets that are progressing nicely.
And how would you capture the market opportunity? So like you said, commercial product already and doing clinical development as well, additionally with this product. So what does that market opportunity look like?
This is $1 billion category that we're going into, and presently it's dominated by antibiotics, and we're all familiar with antibiotic resistance. It's not preferred to obviously give antibiotics prophylactically to people in advance of traveling, and so for that reason there's a need for a product like Travelan, a preventative for travelers' diarrhea. There is no approved FDA medication for prevention of travelers' diarrhea. We're aiming to be the first, so that's all very exciting. And this phase 2 program we're going to talk to you about today is one step towards that. The CDC says that 30 to 70% of people that travel to high-risk regions are likely to get diarrhea. And of course, nobody that travels to, whether it's to the Caribbean, to Mexico, or some other exotic location wants to get that. So we offer an opportunity to prevent that traveller's diarrhea. You can buy that on the market today, but we're developing a prescription product, and we're going to talk more about that with you today.
Great, thank you. And maybe just zeroing in more on the commercial opportunity, are you seeing a pickup? So post-COVID, we've seen an explosion in travel, obviously, and a lot of international travel. So are you seeing that those trends are playing in your favor in terms of commercial traction?
We certainly are. So during COVID, so in our financial year 2021, you can see on the graph on the screen here that we almost hit zero, which was not very good for the company. And also during that time, we were unable to progress clinical trials, being a travel medicine. But as international travel picks up, and if you have a look at the statistics, both in Australia and the US, I should have a picture of a plane shooting up in line with that graph there, because that's the way things are going. We grew last year more than 100% year on year, and so far this year in the 9 months to March, we're also up 154%. And we can see that progressing in the same line, because in Australia, where travel's now exceeding what it was pre-COVID, in the US it's not too far behind. So next year is looking good too.
Nice. Okay. And safe to say that it's an unmet need. It's a need that folks pursue treatment for, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, most people, if they're highly immunocompromised, their healthcare practitioner may prescribe them an antibiotic prophylactically. But as I mentioned before, that's not preferred and not recommended, certainly, because of antimicrobial resistance. So really what they're doing is taking medications with them to treat it after they get it. So you get traveler's diarrhea, you might take loperamide, which will stop those bowel movements. You might take rehydration salts to get the hydration back up again. But this is all after you've already got diarrhea. Nobody wants that. So what we offer is an opportunity for prevention, and that's really the key to all of this.
Got it. Okay, great. And so how does this drug work? So would love to go through the mechanism of action and what it's actually doing, physiologically.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting product in that what we do is we take advantage of the anatomy of a cow. And in cows, they produce colostrum, as do humans. That's that first milk that the mother gives to the child. And that has lots of rich bioactive ingredients. And so colostrum in of itself is very healthy for you. But what we do is we develop a proprietary vaccine for a targeted pathogen. And in the case of Travelan, that's 13 different types of enterotoxigenic E. coli, which is the major cause of traveler's diarrhea. So we inject the cow, and the cow in response to that produces polyclonal antibodies, which are expressed in that colostrum. We collect that as a drug substance and produce a final product in oral form, easy to take by people to prevent traveler's diarrhea.
Great.
I just missed the mechanism of action. So it's on the slide here. And in a simple sense, what we do is, unlike antibiotics, which try to kill that bacteria, we don't do that. We neutralise it and clear it from the gut so it doesn't cause the traveler's diarrhea in the first place.
Great. All right. Yeah, that's really helpful. I don't know, Jerry and Joanne, if there's anything you'd like to add from a mechanism standpoint.
Hi, Matt. I think Steve really did a great job of summarising the technology. I just want to add a few technical points. One is our technology platform is validated. Travelan being our flagship product really tested the waters with the technology. So we have the capability to develop therapeutics to multiple enteric pathogens. And if you look at our portfolio, which I'm sure Steve's going to go through towards the end of the presentation, we not only focus on enterotoxigenic E. coli, which is the Travelan product, we have clinical programs targeting one of the hospital superbugs, Clostridioides difficile, and we also have a program in clinical development with the Navy focused on Campylobacter, and we've got another bunch of preclinical assets in development. But the technology platform focuses on bovine immunoglobulins, and one of the questions I do get asked, why bovine antibodies? They're evolved over time to resist the acidic environment of the stomach, and also they're resistant to the proteolytic enzymes of the gut, and they really make them ideal oral therapeutics. And really that's in a nutshell what the technology is all about.
And I'll just follow up with the mechanism of action. So we know that Travelan acts against the 13 different strains of E. coli that we immunise the cows with, but it's also broad spectrum. So it actually binds and reacts with other gram-negative bacteria, including other different strains of E. coli. So we do know it's broad spectrum, which is very useful. So it's been touched on before, but it protects against bacterial adhesion to the host cell epithelial wall. And you can see here in this electron micrograph on the left panel, this is the E. coli on the attaching to the gut wall and infecting, whereas on the with Travelan, the bacteria is neutralized by the Travelan antibodies, and you can see it clumping, so it's not being absorbed. So it works directly in the gut. It's taken orally, and it's protected against the acid environment of the stomach, goes into the gut and where it works, and it's not actually absorbed into the circulation, so we don't get those anti-bovine antibodies that you see with other products that are given IV.
Joanne, I know that there's a number of other negative gram bacteria that it worked as. What are some of those?
Oh, yeah, sure. So we've done a recent study to show that it actually reacts with E. coli, but it also reacts with other gram-negative bacteria such as Shigella and Campylobacter, and even cholera as well. So we've taken that a little bit further, not only showing binding, but we can see there's a study we did with some colleagues in the US military, and they showed that this actually is functional. So with Shigella, so they challenged this is a preclinical study, so they challenged animals with Shigella, and the ones that were given Travelan were protected, a significant protection, and the ones with the placebo weren't protected. So we're very happy with that data.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really a big reason why the US Department of Defense is so interested in this technology, and that it has such broad spectrum activity. And when US military troops travel to high-risk regions, it's not just E. coli, which causes problems for people going on holiday. There are a number of other bacterial species which are of interest to them, and Travelan is cross-reactive to most of them. So that's very exciting for the DoD development program that we have in conjunction with them.
Great. That's really helpful. And so obviously a lot of applications to the technology, how the science works, pathophysiologically, but the first proof point of which is Travelan and this first application. And so you're recently coming off of news of phase 2 study results, positive results that were announced just last month. We'd love to go through what the design of the phase 2 has been, the interim results that you announced publicly, and to walk through a little bit of that in greater detail.
Yeah, the study design was based on previous clinical protocols. The company had conducted and sponsored 2 clinical studies which were used to license the product in Canada and also listed as a medicine on the Australian Registry for Therapeutic Goods. And these are controlled human infection model studies where healthy volunteers are recruited into the study. They're either randomly assigned a study treatment, in this case Travelan, or a placebo. They're on the study drug for about 2 days, and then they're challenged with 20 million colony-forming units of bacteria, and continue with study drug for 5 days, and their clinical symptoms are monitored by a bunch of medical experts to assess disease severity. And Joe can cover some of the top-line data that was recently announced from the study that was partially funded by the US Department of Defense, and they were really interested in seeing whether a single dose of Travelan was therapeutic in these models. Our previous studies focused on multiple doses, and in fact, we tested 3 doses taken 3 times a day, and that is what's on the label. We recommend taking the product 3 times a day.
Yes, so to follow up, we know that from our previous clinical studies that Travelan taken 3 times a day works really well, and this is our recommended dosing schedule for the commercial product. So we're interested in this study, as Jerry said, whether a single daily dose would protect against the onset of moderate to severe diarrhea, and this was in the challenge study in human volunteers. We performed this phase 2 study in volunteers and looked at the protective effects. So 60 healthy volunteers were recruited for the study, and they were randomized to receive Travelan or placebo once daily. And the study was blind, so they didn't know whether they were receiving Travelan or placebo. And all of the subjects received 1.2 grams of Travelan or placebo in the morning, And again, they were challenged 2 days into their treatment. So at the end of the study, after the 7 days of treatment, they received antibiotics before they could go home to clear out the remaining E. coli. And some subjects, if they had severe symptoms, were given antibiotics early. The subjects returned after 2 weeks, 1 month, and 6 months for safety monitoring. And we collected samples all throughout to measure the clearance of the E. coli, and we're also looking at the effects on the microbiome. So getting to the data, so the objectives of the study were to measure the safety and tolerability of the once daily dosing of Travelan, and the primary endpoint of the clinical study was protection and/or reduction of moderate to severe diarrhea. So for the interim analysis, we're very happy with the data. We saw a 36.4% protective efficacy against E. coli induced moderate to severe diarrhea in the subjects who received Travelan compared to placebo. And this, we didn't know whether this was going to work. So we're very happy with the data, and we were pleased to see that this once daily dosing was equivalent to approximately 50% of the protective efficacy we saw from the 3 times daily dosing. So Travelan not only provided protection against diarrhea, there was a definite trend towards a reduction in the severity of diarrhea and the associated symptoms. And we saw considerable 66.7% reduction in the number of subjects who had severe diarrhea in the Travelan group compared to placebo. And remarkably, there was a significant reduction of 83.3% in the number of subjects with severe diarrhea who required antibiotics, early antibiotics. And all of the subjects with severe cases of diarrhea requiring some rehydration, IV rehydration, were in the placebo group. So you can see again, there's a definite trend towards the reduction of the severity of diarrhea as well as protection against the onset.
Great. Thank you, Joanne. Steve, would love your take on this. You already have a product on the market that's selling, right? And that's growing in sales, but now you can add clinical evidence behind the efficacy of the product. So how do you see the clinical evidence here as strengthening the commercial case for the product?
Yeah, look, this is one step towards getting an FDA-approved prescription medicine. I mentioned before that there are no such things available, so we could be the first. And at the moment in the US, for a dietary supplement, which is how we sell it, you can't make any label claims. So whereas in Australia, we can say that Travelan provides protection, as in prevention and relief for travellers' diarrhea, we can't say that directly in the US market. And so for that reason, the only people that are using it are those that are taking it upon themselves to say, I don't want to get travellers' diarrhea. I've read about this, I'm going to use it. It's not coming at the recommendation of their primary care physician. And that roughly keeps us out of about 50% of the market. And so we would like to be able to put on label the claims that we have. We know that it works. We've done a phase 2 study that shows up to 90% protective effect in the Otto study. That's what we have our claims based on in Australia. We'd like to be able to say that and to have physicians recommend it to their patients before they go on holidays. And so there's a big market opportunity there. Not only that, the US Department of Defense we've spoken about before, they're very interested too, and they want a prescription medicine, and that's why they're providing us that millions of dollars of funding to progress this program.
Okay, great. And what markets are you currently in for Travelan?
Yeah, we're currently in Australia, US, and Canada. In Australia, we sell pretty much everywhere. So we're in every pharmacy around Australia, which is great. And most of our growth has been coming from Australia, and most of our sales are coming from Australia. And people ask me, can that continue? And the answer is yes. Bali is the #1 destination for people in Australia going on holidays. You know, when it's cold, you go somewhere warm it's got nice beaches. That is Bali. And Bali's overtaken New Zealand as the #1 destination. And we're just really touching the surface on tapping into those people going there, taking Travelan as a preventative medicine. And so there's market potential not only in Australia, but US, obviously a much larger population than Australia. We're not in retail pharmacy yet. We're working on that. We launched in July last year in Amazon, and that's going great. Just launched on Walmart.com, and we'll talk more about that as things progress. But we can see that following the Amazon pathway. And next step for us is to get into retail pharmacy. We are going through those category reviews at the moment, so you can expect within the next 12 months or so, we'll get some pharmacy chains stocking our product, and sales should take off from there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's great. So you've permeated Australia quite well. You're in Canada and the US. You're constantly building distribution. You already have a footprint, and then adding pharmaceutical claims should just add more horsepower, if you will, to capturing that opportunity in the US.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Okay, makes sense. So then as we think about the development path in the clinic in the US, what happens next? So from phase 2, what would a phase 3 look like, if you can touch on that?
Yeah, so our path forward from here, I think either Jerry or Joanne mentioned before that we have those follow-up visits for safety purposes. We need to complete those before we can complete the clinical study report. That will be completed in around June or July of this year, and that will be submitted to the FDA, and we'll request a vendor phase 2 meeting, during which we'll speak to them about a phase 3 program. We have had some discussions before with them, and we do have written correspondence from them giving us some idea of what they expect, and that's what's shown on this slide, which is showing on your screen in a minute. Essentially, there'll be likely to be 2 phase 3 programs of roughly 600 patients each. They will be blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled trials. And unlike the phase 2 study, which is a challenge study, these will be in patients, healthy patients traveling to high-risk regions. So that's why you need a much larger number of subjects. And this data is the data that we need and we'd like to see get us onto the CDC Yellow Book as a recommendation for prevention of traveller's diarrhea, as well as the International Society of Travel Medicine as a recommendation for prevention of traveller's diarrhea. We are mentioned in both of those guidelines as potential sources, but because the clinical data we have at the moment is phase 2 only, challenge study only, which is a single strain of bacteria for the challenge, they want evidence that it works in broad spectrum. And Joanne spoke before about Travelan being broad spectrum. We've shown that in preclinical models in both in the lab and also in animal models. So we're confident going into phase 3, we'll be able to demonstrate that, get on those key guidelines, and to satisfy the FDA criteria for approval as a preventative medicine for traveller's diarrhea.
Can I just follow up with some data for a safety perspective? We have a very extensive safety profile for Travelan, which is important for the FDA pathway. And over 500 subjects have received Travelan to date in clinical trials, and there's been no safety issues and only minor side effects. So we're certainly, that adds evidence that Travelan's a safe product, and hopefully the FDA see that favourably in our future trials.
Yeah, apart from the 500 patients in clinical trials, we're approaching 1 million packs being sold into the market, and our real-world evidence from a safety point of view is very, very good. So it has a good safety profile.
Yeah, that's great.
Jerry, you're on mute, I think.
Jared, you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to add the phase 3 registration trial. It's it's a big risk for any organisation migrating from a phase 2 to pivotal phase 3 studies, which are fairly expensive. Our program is de-risked. I think Steve did mention we actually, one of our collaborators is in the middle of a very large field study at the moment, and that readout, it's being performed by the Uniformed Services University. They're testing the product in the field as we speak, recruiting up to about 800 participants, testing Travelan versus a placebo. So that's going to add to our study design as we move into our pivotal registration study as well.
Yeah, an important part, I should have mentioned that study, and I thought we were going to talk about it later, but that study is, it's called a phase 4 study, and that's because it's using our Travelan over-the-counter dietary supplement. So it's not a registration study, but it most likely will be supportive for FDA regulatory process. It is the same type of trial design that we will be going into for a phase 3. And importantly, this is a twice-a-day dosing regimen. So we'll have, we already have data on 3 times a day and once a day. We'll have data also on twice a day. So it will give us more data going into phase 3 as to what dosing regimen to use. And these are in actual US and UK military personnel traveling to high-risk regions. So very rich data. And we're looking to have a top-line readout of that data in around December or so this coming year.
I was going to mention that we do have a very active military collaboration with the NMRC, the Naval Medical Research Command in the US. And obviously the US military are very interested in Travelan because they have thousands of military that are deployed in remote areas where food hygiene and water management can be a problem. And historically, there aren't any vaccines that are on the market for ETEC, E. coli, and other causes of travelers' diarrhea. There is one vaccine for cholera, but but it's not broad spectrum. So the US military and others are very interested in preventatives rather than vaccines and therapeutics. And we do have a very active collaboration. We should acknowledge MTech for our funding to do the clinical study. We were awarded a grant by the US military of $4 million to assist with the phase 2.
Great. That's really helpful, Joanne. So it sounds like you have the platform technology on which you have Travelan and many other applications. And then as you think about commercial strategy, you have retail customers, you are aiming to have a pharmaceutical grade product, and then you have governmental customers. So you have a broad set of different customers as well. So there's a pretty diversified mix of both assets as well as potential end customers. Steve, is that a fair way to view Immuron as a company? And as we look towards milestones for the combined company, how do you see all of these pieces playing together as you look to develop the full breadth of the company?
Yeah, look, I've just seen a few questions come in, and I think I've touched on some of them previously. So, can we see continued sales growth of Travelan? I think I spoke about that before. I think the answer is yes. We've been asked what is our projected sales for the financial year, and we don't give forward-looking guidance on the forecast, but we did show a graph on the slide, and perhaps if you grab your ruler and you can extrapolate that line, it will give you a pretty good idea. So we are excited about the potential for sales of Travelan, but we're also excited about the potential for this clinical program. So we're talking today about the phase 2 data. We'll have the clinical study report read out around June, July. And that will be submitted to the FDA as we spoke. We'll have that end of phase 2 meeting with FDA, which is another milestone we'll report on. But let's not forget that we have the CAMP ETEC program, which has also completed dosing in phase 2. That will also read out shortly. So I think that's around June, July. So June, July is looking to be a very exciting time for the company. The IMM 529 program, Jerry mentioned it in passing. This is for that hospital bacteria that causes major problems in hospital. People get treated with antibiotics, but most of them, or I shouldn't say most of them, it's probably around 20 to 40% of them get recurrence. And so even though they got cured briefly by the antibiotics, it comes back again. And it doesn't just come back once, it comes back multiple times. So it's a big problem. We have a product that has a triple mechanism of action, and it's an oral product, low cost, easy to take. That we've had Humanity, a company that we consult with about market potential, look at this and say, they talk to primary care physicians and they're excited about the potential for this. And Lumanity estimate that notwithstanding the market has some recent entrants which are doing rather well, there's still a US $100 million market opportunity for IMM529 and CDI in the US market alone. The same company, Lumanity, had a look at IMM124E, Travelan, as prescription medicine. They also estimated US $100 million market potential in the US alone. So in a global sense, we're talking between our OTC and RX product for Travelan, this is your $1 billion opportunity that we're talking about. So we're very excited about all of these. And the Uniform Services University study that Jerry mentioned before, so we're 64% recruited now. That was data that came out just yesterday, and ASX and SEC release. So that means of those 866 patients, 64% of them have been recruited. We're looking at a top-line readout of that towards the end of this calendar year. So very rich milestone, which should drive value in our stock. And in an Australian sense, there's very few Australian biotech companies that have phase 3 programs, and we're looking to be one of those few. And I would imagine that there may be a re-rating of the stock on the back of that.
Thank you, Steve. That's really helpful. I know we're coming to the end of time, but I think we covered the bulk of the primary subject today, which was the clinical program related to IMM529. But obviously, the company has a broad set of assets and development programs going forward. And thank you, Steve, for giving a picture of what that could look like. For questions that we didn't answer, please send them to us individually. We'll be sure to follow up with any participants that submitted questions that we couldn't get to. Thank you, everyone, for making the time to participate with us today. And Steve, Joanne, and Jerry, thank you very much for joining us today to discuss Immuron.
Hey, Matt, maybe just before we go, I just saw one question come in regarding funding of the phase 3 program. And so look, that phase 3 program is going to take roughly 2 years for each trial. Each trial is going to cost roughly $5 million each. We currently had, at end of December, $15 million of cash. So while we do have a lot of cash, there will be a funding requirement for those phase 3 studies. And the question that's been asked is, how do we intend to fund that? When we announced the phase 2 results, we did mention that we're going to seek non-dilutive funding. And in that regard, Jerry and I will be traveling to a military conference in the US in May, and we'll have discussions with the Department of Defense and others about contributing non-dilutive funding towards that program. So watch this space on that one.
Great.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's been my pleasure speaking to you today, and thanks Jerry and Joanne and Matt for hosting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes the webinar. Thank you for your participation, and a recording will be available after the time portion of this event. Thank you, everyone.
Very good. Thank you.